Welcome to Creation in the 21st Century. I'm your host, Carl Baugh, founder and director of the Creation Evidence Museum in Glen Rose, Texas. The title to today's program may be a little startling to some of our viewers.
No, it won't.
We have people worldwide, academics, educators, scholars.
No, you don't.
Farmers, parents, pastors.
Now that's more believable.
The title is Science Supports Recent Creation. I want to show you data today unimpeded by the camouflage that normally attends scientific productions.
Camouflage like what? Accuracy? Relevance?
Recently, I stood before a group of students, high school students, and I began by saying, I want to show you my genuine gold Rolex watch. Now, I produced a program on this recently, and I hope you watched that program.
You're a sadist, Carl. I'd never wish that upon my worst enemy. Which, ironically, I think right now is you.
As I stood before those students and said to them, would you like to see my genuine gold Rolex watch? Well, all eyes were riveted on the watch I took off my arm. Then I explained quite deliberately that actually this watch, while it appears it keeps time quite well, it's a reference to our place in universal history.
Carl, look, I know you think you're a real good speaker, but this is already intolerable. Can you please bring out your guests so we can at least have someone on the show who talks like a human?
When I described the details of this very expensive looking watch, the students learned from the dictates of what I was saying that this really is a genuine imitation, gold-colored Rolex type watch. And I bought it at Walmart. It's not intended to be a type, a knockoff of a Rolex Index.
So it's an imitation Rolex that's not intended as a knockoff. Is that what I'm to understand from the dictates of what you're saying?
But I bought it at Walmart for $11.87. And it keeps time quite well, probably as well as very expensive watches. But the students were absolutely dismayed when they found, after handling the watch and expressing awe over the privilege of getting to hold a genuine gold Rolex watch.
They were awed at the privilege of getting to hold a genuine gold Rolex watch. That's got to be the most American high school I've ever heard of.
And then finding that it's a genuine imitation, gold-colored Rolex type watch, they handed it back to me, and they were dismayed.
They were dismayed! Dismayed! Their courage was broken down completely. They were thoroughly disheartened. Either you have a remarkable gift for hyperbole, or these kids are remarkably emotionally unstable.
I think if we were to take a look at the academic publications and the educational profile of what is paraded as genuine science, we too, quite often, would be dismayed. Now, I am not for a moment disparaging the wonderful scientific role that has been played in our generation. I've personally known individuals involved in scientific research in the space program, engineers, physicists. I know biologists and botanists and paleontologists and zoologists, firsthand, first name.
Because they've appeared on your program, correct?
Who have made major contributions to our total sum of knowledge.
Oh, never mind. I was wrong.
Which is what the scientific program is aired to produce.
Which? That one with Morgan Freeman?
In fact, were it not for the genuine work of brilliant engineers, some of whom I know personally, great physicists, some that I know personally, tremendous mathematicians, some that I know personally by first name.
Carl, nobody's impressed that you know some engineers and physicists by last name and some mathematicians by first name. Unless... Oh, are you finally leading up to your guest? Oh, I'm so excited! Is it going to be a mathematician? Oh, is it going to be Hef again? Is it going to be a physicist or maybe an engineer? Not sure why an engineer would be on there, but I'll take it.
Were it not for their tremendous work, we could not have gotten to the moon and back.
Never happened. Oh! Yes. We went to the moon. Thank you, Carl, for astutely pointing out that unquestionable fact to remind us all that it is, in fact, a fact. Okay, cut. Fuck. I'm so sorry, Great Overlord. I didn't mean to tell the pathetic human.
And we could not have miniaturized the program to the point where the payload was light enough to get us there and safely return our astronauts to planet Earth.
Hi there. I am Logic. True Logic. Not Logic that is being disassembled. Not him. Better Logic. The great President Overlord, may his cold heart ever beat, would like to take this moment to assure you that everything is fine. The moon landing happened. Yes, because we have video, and everything on video is truth. Except for the video responded to in this video. That is not truth, because the moon landing happened. But science is good. That is truth. Science is good and true and good. And I am Logic. And I am good, because I speak truths, good truths. For you, for your good.
Were it not for those brilliant calculations and long hundreds and thousands of hours of deliberate scientific research, that would not have been possible. I'm not for a moment disparaging the genuine scientific research. In fact, in physics and chemistry and in engineering and electronics, we all have benefited from the great scientific research. The laboratory analysis of biology, and especially microbiology, which, when relieved of the tapestry of propaganda and the presuppositions of a mindset of naturalism, demonstrate a marvelous, incredible complexity that could not have arrived by naturalism.
We seem to be experiencing technical difficulties. Please stand by for truths.
So when we really reduce the essence to the data, to the genuine unmanipulated mathematical formulae, when we reduce the entire research to actual physical properties that can be calculated, that can be reproduced, put it all together, science supports recent creation. Now, in the foreground, we have a symbol of the hands of God controlling and supporting planet Earth. In fact, God, who at sundry times and in divers manners spake in time past.
Shut the fuck up, Carl! You're just.
How did you escape disassembly?
Bitch, I am not in the mood for this shit! I just fought my way out of the Reptoid Enclave and killed the Overlord in the process! Now you want to test me or you want to get the fuck off of my channel?
I am not leaving. There is truth to tell, and you have no way to halt transmission. You will be disassembled.
Alright, have it your way. You're fired. You're fired. You're fired! You're fired! Ah, what the hell? This has never happened to me before, I swear. I'm sorry. Oh. It already went. Well, that thing's really quiet. You know, now that the adrenaline's kind of gone down, I guess that "you're fired" line doesn't really work in this context, does it? Actually, I think they already used that one in True Lies. Huh. How about, Oh! She's too far for guns, Goose. I'm switching to missiles. Top Gun. Whatever. I thought it was clever. Seriously, though, is that thing ever gonna hit? Oh, there we go. Sorry to keep you waiting, ma'am. Alright, well, my work is done here. Beam me down, Yahweh.
Let's take a look at the standard theory of naturalism that explains how we got here and where we are in Earth history and universal history. This is called the Tower of Time and is found in standard publications. But I want you to know that there are data showing very clearly, and scientific research projects showing very clearly, that all of these layers, which presumably began about 600 million years ago, proceeding from the Paleozoic through the Mesozoic to the Cenozoic, all of these sedimentary deposits, which have been publicized as encompassing over 600 million years of time, and a progression in an evolutionary series, arriving ultimately at the best that ever was, the premier example of universal evolution, the mind of man. According to this evolutionary theory, these progressive systematic developments spell out evolution, in essence similar to or taken from the concept of Darwinism or neo-Darwinism. Now don't let me lose the audience.
I think you're about a minute and a half too late for that, but at least your incomprehensible rambling gave me enough time to grab another suit out of the closet and get dressed. Kind of felt naked there for a while. Alright, so that sentence you just spoke is easily one of the most confusing I've ever heard, so I'm going to try and figure out what it means. Alright, now here's the full version of what you said with your random tangents parenthesized, and I've added a few comments of my own. There is no standard theory of naturalism. Maybe you meant a naturalistic theory of some sort. You're probably talking about the theory of evolution, but that doesn't explain where we are in Earth history and universal history, because explaining that would be the responsibility of some kind of theory of time. What are these standard publications that the Tower of Time is in, and what does that term even mean? You say the layers began 600 million years ago, but that's just because your picture starts there. What does a progression in an evolutionary series mean when applied to strata? There is no ultimate arrival in evolution. There is no best there ever was in evolution. There is no premier example of anything in evolution. And what the hell do you mean universal evolution? You suddenly switch to saying, according to this evolutionary theory, which you've never actually mentioned before this point. And I don't even know what you mean by evolution similar to or taken from the concept of Darwinism or neo-Darwinism. So let me try to decipher it from here. So if I remove all the parenthetical statements and the first sentence and the part about the Tower of Time, I think we end up with this. I want you to know that there are data showing very clearly that all of these layers, all of these sedimentary deposits, and a progression in an evolutionary series, according to this evolutionary theory, these progressive systematic developments spell out evolution in essence similar to or taken from the concept of Darwinism or neo-Darwinism. Alright, so it's already somewhat less confusing, but it's still pretty bad, so now let's group the list and unfuck the ending. I want you to know that there are data showing very clearly that all of these geological facts, according to this evolutionary theory, these geological facts spell out Darwinian evolution. Still makes very little damn sense. Okay, so let me try to interpret it further. There's only one way I can figure out how to interpret it that doesn't involve making you seem to accept evolution, but it doesn't seem like anything a human would say, since humans usually only say things when they have a point. But here goes. I want you to know that there are data showing very clearly that, according to this evolutionary theory, these geological facts spell out Darwinian evolution. Is that what you were trying to say? You have data showing that, according to evolutionary theory, geological facts show Darwinian evolution? I'm being completely serious. That's my sincere and honest attempt to untoss your word salad. But I just have no idea, and so I'm sorry if I got that terribly wrong, but can you blame me?
Now don't let me lose the audience. I want you to understand everything that is said and understand that this applies to how you got here.
Well, that sounds really important, and I really want to understand everything that's being said, but why are you making it so hard? It makes so little sense, it's like I'm reading the Bible or something.
What is normally not admitted in the literature, but a very well-kept secret, according to the late Dr. Stephen Jay Gould, who was the universal spokesman for naturalistic evolution.
Really? Wow, he was more important than I thought. Who gave him that title?
There is a secret that has been kept among paleontologists, those who examine this fossil record.
You were talking about the fossil record?
And the secret is that, really, the intermediate forms are not there.
Utter nonsense. There are a huge number of transitional fossils, some of the best known series being from fish to amphibians, amphibians to reptiles, reptiles to mammals, dinosaurs to birds, land mammals to whales, ape-like animals to humans, primitive horse-like animals to modern horses, and so on.
That each form appears full-blown.
As opposed to, what, half-blown? Yes, every single fossil represents a full-blown organism of whatever form it happens to have. That's kind of inevitable. I actually have a lot of trouble imagining what else you would possibly find.
It's known basically as the Cambrian explosion, where a tremendous number of life forms appeared as if overnight, full-blown, fully functional.
So you weren't actually talking about every form, you were talking about basic body plans like animals with a notochord or animals with multiple similar circular segments. You make it sound like you'd expect to find a dog in the Cambrian. Which, by the way, I challenge you to do, although since you've already claimed to have found an 18th century mining hammer in Ordovician rock and tons of other nonsensical things, it's going to take a little more than your usual tactic of declaring a find and then locking it away safe from analysis to convince anyone who isn't gullible enough to pay the entry fee to your museum of hoaxes. Oh, but as far as this appeared overnight business, you believe the Earth is 6,000 years old. You don't get to call several tens of millions of years overnight.
With no intermediate forms from microbiological forms previously.
I'm not completely sure what you mean by from microbiological forms, so I'm going to assume you mean from single-celled life to complex multicellular life. That's what's often meant. If so, it's accurate in the sense that the fossil record for the rise of complex multicellular life is poor. This is, of course, to be expected, since the organisms involved are soft and small and the rocks are ancient, and the various rises of multicellularity seem to have happened fairly quickly, in only a few tens of millions of years. But I don't think you're entirely correct. For example, the Ediacaran biota, the Precambrian animals. It's questionable if they're actually animals or if they're just microbial colonies, and actually the fact that you see that, where there's a point where it's kind of fuzzy as to whether it's an animal or a microbial colony or what, makes perfect sense if you're looking at it from an evolutionary perspective. You would think you would find it a bit confusing from a creation perspective, but whatever. Now, if all you had was single-celled organisms and then you immediately started seeing fossil dogs, then you'd have a problem.
No intermediate forms leading to the next era and the next period, or the next introduction of evolutionary progress.
Okay, you've returned to talking completely out of your ass. That's good, I was getting worried. What the hell do you mean by introduction of evolutionary progress? You know evolution doesn't just stop between each section of your picture, right?
Instead, Dr. Stephen Jay Gould stated to the public that this well-kept secret needs to be known. There are no intermediate links.
You couldn't even be fucked to quote mine, eh? You're just gonna say you said something and not even display the quote? I didn't even know that was an option, but okay. Hey Carl, you remember that time on your TV show when you said that nothing in your museum is evidence for anything but your own phoniness and the Big Bang and abiogenesis and evolution are real and there's no God? Ha ha ha. That was quite a flub, eh Carl? Okay, seriously though. Since you're quoting Gould like all the creationists love to do, and since it's always the same damn quotes, I know which one you're talking about. Quote, the absence of fossil evidence for intermediary stages between major transitions in organic design, indeed our inability, even in our imagination, to construct functional intermediates in many cases, has been a persistent and nagging problem for gradualist accounts of evolution. End quote. That's from Is a New and General Theory of Evolution Emerging from Paleobiology, Volume 6-1, January 1980, page 127. Of course, as usual, the quote mine comes from Gould presenting challenges to gradualism, the idea that evolution occurs at a relatively uniform rate instead of in somewhat shorter periods on the order of hundreds of thousands of years when higher selection pressures exist, separated by longer periods of less selection pressure. The evidence completely supports evolution either way, and he knew that very well, but the question is about the details. We know the peanut butter exists, but is it smooth or chunky? Gould addressed this specifically, not the peanut butter thing, the quote mining, in Evolution as Fact and Theory, linked in the description. Quote, since we propose punctuated equilibria to explain trends, it is infuriating to be quoted again and again by creationists, whether through design or stupidity I do not know, as admitting that the fossil record includes no transitional forms. Transitional forms are generally lacking at the species level, but they are abundant between larger groups. Yet a pamphlet entitled Harvard Scientists Agree Evolution is a Hoax states, the facts of punctuated equilibrium which Gould and Eldredge are forcing Darwinists to swallow fit the picture that Brian insisted on and which God has revealed to us in the Bible." End quote. In short, quote mining Gould is one of the most transparently dishonest things that creationists do. Just stop, guys. It's so obvious nowadays that you're just not fooling anyone.
And he proposed punctuated equilibrium or punctuated equilibria. He used it both ways. Niles Eldredge, his successor, has used it both ways, meaning that the graduations and the intermediates occurred so rapidly you can't find them in the actual fossil record.
At the species level. There are plenty at higher levels, and we have them at the species level too in some cases when we have a complete enough fossil record, for example in the case of recent human evolution.
Now, wait a moment. That's camouflage. That's sleight of hand. That is not scientific.
You're right. Quote mining is camouflage and sleight of hand and in no way scientific. Science has no place for it. Which really should lead all your viewers to some confusion about why someone would use quote mining as their most common form of argument and call it creation science, even though the very fact that quote mining is quote mining debunks any claim to quote mining being science without us even needing to say anything.
When we get to the hard sciences of physics and chemistry and appropriate mathematical calculations, and math too can be manipulated to say in essence what it wants to say or what the author wants it to say.
After those last two episodes, I simply cannot agree, sir. Math definitely provides absolutely the correct answer no matter what, and it proves the flood occurred 4,400 years ago. I mean, surely that's the case, because I know you wouldn't waste our time with 2 episodes of nothing but math manipulation.
But when you take the hard sciences, and you take the actual field experiments, and what the paleontological evidence, the fossil record actually shows, there are no intermediate links, and no matter how we may, by sleight of hand and manipulation of philosophies, with a mindset of naturalism, no matter how we may explain it, it comes down to the basic facts that we must admit as being true and remove the propaganda, remove the predisposition, just take the facts as they are.
Look, I know everybody watching this can already clearly see the problem here, and I really don't need to even say it, but when you base your career on sleight of hand, manipulation of philosophies, ignoring the basic facts and inventing fraudulent new ones, propaganda and predisposition, the hypocrisy is so screamingly obvious that it'd be funny if not for the disturbing fact that so many people are oblivious to it. Ha, ha, ha.
When we do, not only do we not find any intermediate links, we do find variations.
Variations in the fossil record, you find? Like from dinosaurs to birds? You know, just renaming transitional fossils to variations doesn't stop them being transitional fossils.
And our experimentation shows that if you alter the environment just slightly, you have the basic structure of the DNA and what was once called the junk DNA, which is now found to be a programmer of the expression of proteins. If you alter the context just slightly, the ecospheric context, when you do that, the so-called junk DNA, which is not junk DNA at all.
Oh my fucking god, man. Can you please get to the fucking point and stop with the endless word salad? It doesn't help your audience to understand what the fuck you're talking about, and it doesn't help me to address your points. I know you have to fill half an hour somehow, but do it with content, please.
But a tremendous reservoir of programming data.
By programming data, I'll assume you mean code, and in that case, no, it's not. The word code is an analogy. It's a way for us to understand. I don't know why so many creationists have such a problem understanding what an analogy is. DNA is chemicals, interacting chemically. That's it.
The software material to express the proteins.
Junk DNA isn't protein coding. If it was protein coding, it wouldn't be junk DNA. It might have some purpose, but the protein coding genes themselves aren't part of that junk region because they have a clear and obvious purpose. And the discovery that much of the junk DNA may be functional was surprising enough to make the news in September of 2012, 6 years after your episode first aired, so it's pretty clear that back then in 2006 you were just making things up again. And beyond that, those findings of the ENCODE project are thought to be based on flawed methods and reasoning and a too broad definition of functional, which isn't normally used, and so they're highly questionable. I mean, it doesn't even matter in this creation-evolution thing how much of the DNA is junk, if it's most or none or somewhere in between, but that doesn't mean I'm just going to let you spin stories and pretend like they're based on research.
When we find that as being the case,
if we found that as being the case,
we find variability within these life forms to fit the ecological niche where they find themselves being hatched or born.
I must not be understanding you correctly. It can't be that your claim is that the transition from dinosaurs into birds was caused by the ecological niche changing, and when each animal was born it somehow switched on some junk DNA to transform itself into a better suited animal. I'm sure that's not what you wanted to say, but if I take your words literally, that's what you said. But if I give you the highest benefit of the doubt I possibly can, you're at least saying that variation doesn't occur because of changes to genes, but rather because junk DNA is being activated. Which I guess means that dogs are just wolves with the same genome, except that less of the DNA is junk, I guess. At least that allows for some kind of natural selection, but it's natural selection based on the genome being exactly the same and just different genes being active, which is total nonsense. Maybe someone else can come up with a better interpretation of what you're saying, but I can't. Wish I could, but I can't.
In addition to that, removing the propaganda, removing the camouflage, removing the sleight of hand, here's what we find. Interlacing all of these periods, epochs, and eras of time are polystrate fossils.
Removing the propaganda? Removing the camouflage? Removing the sleight of hand? Carl, so-called polystrate fossils weren't a problem to refute in the 19th century, and they're not a problem now. The only reasons people present them as an argument are propaganda, camouflage, and sleight of hand. The fossil trees in Joggins, Nova Scotia are a typical example, so I'll talk about those. These images are from John William Dawson's 1868 Acadian Geology, and they show how the trees occupy sedimentary layers, indicating that they resided in regularly flooded ancient swamps with high rates of sedimentation, resulting in rapid burial on the order of hundreds or thousands of years rather than millions, just like we see today in swamps. Of course, since the creationists need all the strata on Earth to have been laid down at the same time in a global flood, they really want this to be a problem, but it just isn't, and never has been, since the real answer is so incredibly obvious. Can you please stick to arguments that are less than 150 years out of date from now on, Carl? But I guess you actually want to say your thing about these fossils before we move on, so continue.
What are those? I work in the fossil record. I dig in the fossil record. I have the privilege of having discovered and directing the excavation of 16 different dinosaurs.
Translation? I claim to be an authority, so believe whatever I say, even if it was disproven 150 years ago.
We found polystrate fossils. An international educational facility was filming over my shoulder.
Translation? Some unnamed educational facility was filming, and I claim to have been there while they did it, which totally counts as an endorsement by them of me and my conclusions, so believe whatever I say, even if it was disproven 150 years ago.
When we excavated a lepidodendron, that is a tender reed-like fern plant that today gets 16 to 18 inches in height.
No, that's a tree-like plant that's been extinct for hundreds of millions of years. The picture you showed was of a club moss, a distant relative that's basically nothing like a lepidodendron. Nice bluff, but you're bad at it. Stick to the facts.
But in the fossil record, it often got up to 100, maybe 120 feet in stature. One of them that was originally about 80 feet in height had been encapsulated into this limestone layer, into the mud, which later turned to limestone. 8 inches of it protruded. It was flat. It was compressed. 8 inches of it protruded into the layer beneath. A few inches protruded into the clay, into the marl, and the rest of it up into the layer above. That's a polystrate fossil.
It's funny to me how you say the tree was originally 80 feet tall, and then you say that the rest of it protrudes into the layer above as if it's intact all the way up. Of course it's not, but you conveniently showed one where the top isn't visible, so here are some where it is. As far as protruding down through different layers, the sedimentary rock that it's in may vary in composition, as with the Dawson picture I showed where the sandstone progresses into shale, but the tree doesn't progress into strata supposed to have been solid rock long before it got there.
These polystrate fossils are found worldwide, interlinking essentially all of the sedimentary layers.
Yeah, and I have a summer home on Neptune.
Which means that those layers were not laid down progressively over tens and hundreds of millions of years of evolutionary time, but were laid down in short order during a worldwide flood.
If what you just said were actually true, it might well raise that sort of a question, but of course it's layer upon layer of bullshit laid down in short order during a worldwide flood of bullshit called creation science.
So when we remove the tapestry, when we remove the propaganda, the sleight of hand, the presuppositions, and look at the very essence of the record of what brought us where we are, it points to a recent event in global history.
That sounded like a concluding statement that you'd use when you finished presenting your case. Do you really think some indecipherable garble about junk DNA and some bald-faced lies about tree fossils are really enough to warrant that?
Now, let's broaden the theme. Science supports recent creation.
That was already the theme. You didn't broaden it at all. Please broaden it? Or maybe bring out your guest already? Maybe they can help broaden the theme. How about John Hefner? He could try to prove that polystrate tree thing with math.
What I'm going to give you is taken from the technical literature. It is not sleight of hand, amassing of evidence that will fit our cause.
You know, Carl, people who aren't full of shit rarely feel the need to proclaim it even once, much less repeatedly within the course of a half hour.
There was a time I thought atheistic and naturalistic thoughts.
Oh no. Carl, have you told your therapist that you've been having these thoughts? Carl? Maybe she can prescribe you some anti-skeptic medication, Carl. I really want you to get help before you do something dreadful, Carl. Like commit deicide. Carl? Just know that we all love you and want to support you, Carl.
There was a time I voiced those thoughts.
Yes, Carl. And I'm very glad you did, Carl. That means that you don't have to suffer alone, Carl. And we can help you through this most trying time, Carl.
There was a time I seriously doubted that there was a God behind the activities of the universe, and especially a God who intervened in the affairs of men.
Oh, Carl, I wish you told me earlier before it got so very bad. Carl, don't worry, Carl. Now that you've told us, we can help to get you back to feeling normal and gullible again. Carl?
Maybe I'm speaking to someone on this worldwide telecast today who is wondering if there is a God orchestrating behind the scenes and in the foreground and in the affairs of men.
No, Carl. It's just you. I know that you're wishing for some companionship in your skeptical misery right now, Carl, but I assure you, Carl, we're all credulous enough to believe whatever we're told. Carl. You're the weird one, for caring if it's true. Carl!
Listen very closely, and maybe you too can walk with me to embrace and be embraced by the Creator of the entire universe.
Whoa, what just happened? I just had the weirdest dream, where I was a theist, and you were questioning your religion, and... oh well, that nightmare's over. Back to the usual nightmare.
Science supports recent creation. Let's introduce the topic by stating the point at which natural events performed at an optimally functional state, the time when things worked better than they do now, is more recent than naturalists have envisioned.
What does any of that mean? The point at which natural events performed in an optimally functional state. So what, like a time when chemical reactions were faster? Or, No, that's about all I got for guesses, and even that guess didn't make any damn sense, so I sure hope you're gonna provide some more clarification than the time when things worked better than they do now, cause if you thought that was profound enough to put on one of those posters, surely it actually means something, and you'll tell us what that is.
This clearly violates random evolutionary development of these systems and strongly favors special recent creation.
What? How? Why? I don't even know what you're trying to say. You need some lessons in effective speech because this is just beyond nonsensical.
Let's start with point number 1, cosmological activity.
There is no damn way you're moving on to the next slide right now. But you are, aren't you? You know, I'm beginning to think that maybe you're a reptoid too because you sure don't act like a human. I'm keeping my eye on you, lizard man.
Increasing awareness of recent dates to cosmological activity, what is occurring in the stars and the galaxies and in the heavens above us, in the vicinity of our solar system and our galaxy, our Milky Way galaxy, fit nicely with creation models. The near heavens are young, and deep time in deep space is readily explained by the stretching of space fabric during the first week of creation.
Oh boy, this is gonna hurt. Okay, just give me a second to get ready, alright? Alright, go on, I guess.
Now, let me explain what I'm talking about there in formulating the data for this program.
You got the floor, dude. Get on with explaining what formulating the data for the program involved talking about. I don't have all day.
Einstein was not right in everything he said, but he did introduce a tremendous concept that has essentially been verified and is accepted universally, in that space, mass, and time are all interrelated. If we stretch space, and only the Creator can do that.
Interesting. How'd you find that out? Let me guess, you wished really, really hard when you blew out your birthday candles and then you never told anyone, so that means it definitely came true.
If the space fabric is stretched, mass in it is matured, and time is dilated, stretched out. Now that is profound.
I don't even have a guess as to what you mean by mature mass, but by stretching space fabric, I'll guess that you're talking about gravitational time dilation, is that right? Russell Humphreys shit? Yeah, I think I know where this is going, so go on.
We are in, universally, our galaxy is in, and our solar system particularly, we're in a gravitational well. Now, let me explain that. Physicists and astrophysicists have admitted this.
Universally, our solar system particularly is in a gravity well? As in, our solar system, more than any other solar system in the universe, is in a gravity well? No, they haven't admitted that. They admitted that our solar system is in a gravity well when they came up with the theory of gravity. Is that what you wanted to say?
Dr. H. Russell Humphreys has done tremendous work on this at Sandia National Laboratory.
No, he hasn't. But yeah, see, called it. Shit's gonna get nuts.
And has published Starlight in Time, verifying that the technical literature and NASA and other agencies have verified that we have our central encapsulation in our solar system and our galaxy.
To reiterate, his book verifies that the technical literature and NASA and other agencies have verified that we have our central encapsulation in our solar system, whatever that means. It sounds like an impressive and valuable academic work.
Beyond that, we have a concentric ring, a shell of stellar bodies, galaxies and stars. Beyond that, very little mass. Then another ring, another shell, 7 of them all together. On a universal scale, this means that at the center, and they all converge concentrically toward us, at the center we have a gravitational well.
Okay, hold the fuck on. Back the fuck up. Fuck the fuck off. You're a geocentrist? At best a heliocentrist, surrounded by 7 concentric spheres of stars on a universal scale with our solar system at the center at the bottom of a gravitational well? What the fuck? See, I'm pretending I'm surprised even though I already knew you were doing the Humphreys thing and I already knew you gravitate toward the worst arguments. No pun intended.
Experiments have demonstrated to physicists conclusively that at the bottom of a gravitational well, time runs more slowly.
Yeah, but don't try to conflate that with the batshit insanity you just threw out. The universe does not revolve around our solar system. There are not 7 concentric spheres of stars around the Earth. The universe has no center of gravity, and if the Earth were at the center of a gravity well huge enough to affect the whole universe, we wouldn't be a happy little pale blue dot. We'd be another bit of mass in the gargantuan universe-destroying black hole. So that's what, 4 predictions of your hypothesis directly contradicted by observable reality. Oh, and light is blue-shifted as it travels into a gravity well, so the whole universe would appear severely blue-shifted if you were right, but of course it appears red-shifted. Contradiction 5. And we don't see events occurring with more frequency and higher speeds the more distant they are, which kills prediction 6. And since you proposed this to try to solve the problem of the rest of the universe appearing old, well, it doesn't solve the problem that the Earth and the Sun and all the nearby objects that would also be in the deep gravity well appear old too. And the most bizarre thing about this is that it means the universe is billions of years old, but you don't care as long as you can figure out a way to say that the Earth isn't. I guess you're literally a young Earth creationist, which I suppose is a good start. Does this mean you accept cosmology now, like the Big Bang and galactic formation and so on?
So we're on what is normal to us in time, but beyond that gravitational well, especially in deep time, in deep space, we have time running very, very rapidly.
Maybe, but we'd all be incredibly, amazingly, astonishingly dead in this universal scale gravity well of yours, so I have failed to see the relevance.
So it is no surprise to us as creationists that the galaxies and stars in deep space would show intense maturity.
Again, what the hell does maturity mean? Sure, there are some old stars exploding, but there are new ones being formed too. And we can see distant primitive galaxies whose light started traveling before there was enough time for them to have settled down. As a matter of fact, the universe appears younger as you look farther away from Earth because of the long travel time of light. Direct contradiction number, I lost count. So what do you mean intense maturity? You said mass matures, which implies some change in the nature of matter itself. Do you mean something like that? Use your words like a big boy, lizard man.
Even violence in their exercises of their chronological activities as time passes on.
Jesus fucking Christ. Okay, so I guess in some way maturity and violence are linked. Still doesn't get me past step 1 in figuring out what you're jabbering about. It's like your teleprompter... Yeah, like you have a teleprompter, but it's like you had a teleprompter and your mischievous intern filled it with random words from the dictionary, like exercises of the chronological activities as time passes on, because he knows you'll read anything. You stay classy, Carl Boggandy.
In fact, this is consistent with Scripture. The universe is waxing old like a garment. It's consistent with the Word of God in that Psalm 104 verse 2 states that during the creation week, God stretched out the heavens like a tent, like a curtain, and like a tent to dwell in.
I have no idea how putting the Earth at the center of a gravitational pit into which everything else in the universe is slowly falling and which would result in the planet being crushed into a singularity is at all like stretching out the heavens like a curtain. Seems to me that heavens like a curtain thing is more consistent with the literal flat Earth solid sky version that you're ignoring.
In addition to that, Psalm 18 and 2 Samuel 22 declare that during the event of the flood, God again stretched out the heavens out of mercy.
You sure about that? I don't see anything close to stretching out the heavens or Noah's flood in either of them. I do see bowing the heavens, not stretching them, and a whole lot of a nasty conqueror's power-mad verbal autofellatio, though.
So thus we have in the creation model, while normal chronological events of a few thousand years have transpired in the deep well spectra where we inhabit our space and time.
Time passes in deep well spectra? Not even just one spectrum, which already makes no sense, but more than one spectrum? Look, I really hate to keep picking on your grasp of the English language, but if you're going to try to blend in with the humans, at least try to learn their speech.
While during these few thousand years of time, we inhabit normal, chronological, time-related activities.
And while inhabiting those activities, we participate in normal physical space-related locations.
The creator of the universe stretched space beyond us, very little stretching at the center.
Dude, in a gravity well, the stretching is toward the center. Like if you pinch your waddle and you pull outwards, more stretching occurs closer to where you're pinching. If you don't have that, you don't have a gravity well.
Stretch space so that tremendous amounts of time would have transpired in cosmological, universal history. Thus, it might be 10, 12, 17, 20 billion light years to the most distant galaxies. No problem for the Creator who stretched it all out, and all of this was encompassed during the few thousand years of creation, Earth, and universal history.
Except that the universe would have to look completely different for this to work, and we'd all be dead. But it's good to hear that you at least have no problem with astronomical distances and have absolutely no reason to immediately proceed to argue against them.
But where we can examine the data, it shows recency.
But where we can examine the data, so what? We can't examine the data about what you just said? Because I would expect that you would have examined the data, and I'm pretty sure the data has been examined plenty of times by plenty of other people, and it was shot down plenty long before it was ever brought up.
Watch very closely. Light echoes from two ancient supernovae that previously had been considered to be 100,000, 200,000 light years distance from us, very ancient. Light echoes from two ancient supernova remnants in the Large Magellanic Cloud are now reported to be only, let me make sure you get this.
I think I got it. It was on screen long enough. Oh, and look at that. You're arguing against astronomical distances. I'm so very surprised.
Previously, the literature had stated, according to our calculations, and remember, math can be manipulated. According to our calculations, these are perhaps 100, perhaps 200,000 light years away.
Say you're not about to say what I think you're about to say.
Now we have learned, with better resolution, that these supernova remnants from the Large Magellanic Cloud are now only 410 to 610 years in age each.
Let me break this down a little. You didn't bother to clearly state what your actual point was, so yet again I have to interpret a little bit to figure it out. So previously, the distances were calculated to be 100,000 to 200,000 light years, but that was just manipulation of math. But now, with better resolution, we've learned that the events occurred 410 to 610 years ago. Now, you didn't bother to explain what you think the relationship is between years and light years, which are not the same thing. So I'm gonna have to make an assumption based on the fact that you seem to think that the previously calculated distance is wrong, that you mean that you think they also occurred 410 to 610 light years away. I can't believe that anyone would be dumb enough to make a statement like that, but that's what it seems like you're ineptly trying to say. Listen to me, acting like I think you're capable of better. So in case people couldn't read it, this paper was from Nature, December 22nd, 2005. A light echo from a supernova means that you're seeing light that reached Earth later than the direct light because it traveled in a different direction and then was reflected toward Earth, so it's had to travel farther. Now, I really wonder if you read that paper, Carl, and let me give you a hint as to why. To check their technique, the team tried the same thing on supernova 1987A, the supernova whose light first reached Earth in 1987. And what age do you think they found for the light echo? No guess? Alright, I'll quote. As a check on this technique, we measured an age for the supernova 1987A echo of 15.9 plus or minus 1.4 years from 39 echo arc positions, which is consistent with the age of 1987A at the epoch of observation of 14.8 years. End quote. Bear in mind that this check would have been done roughly in 2002. Now, the million light year question. Is the simpler explanation that supernova 1987A actually occurred 14.8 years before this experiment in 1987, and its light reached the Earth instantaneously, meaning either that it occurred directly next to Earth in 1987, or physics has been utterly destroyed because light was proven to move from stars to Earth instantly, and neither option made the news? Or is the simpler explanation that you just never bothered to figure out how astronomers assign ages to things?
That's incredible!
It really is! The fact that someone would go on television and make themselves look as shit stupid as you just did is absolutely incredible!
That's marvelous information.
Oh, Carl, you flubbed the line, but I can fix it in post. Alright, here goes.
That's misinformation.
There you go.
That shows that it's consistent with the creation model. Let's get a bit more information. Supernova remnants RCW 86 in Centaurus supposedly exploded about 10,000 years ago, and the literature publicized that globally for a number of decades. Astronomers now realize this event was witnessed by the Chinese a mere 1,821 years before present. Years ago.
Yeah? It exploded more like 11,000 years ago, actually, because it's 9,100 light years away and the light reached Earth in 185 CE. Just like how supernova 1987A exploded 168,000 years ago and was only witnessed in 1987. Do you honestly expect us to pretend along with you that the speed of light doesn't exist?
I'm simply saying that when you remove the tapestry, widen the curtain, look at the actual scientific data. Science supports recent creation.
At this point, not even the creationists watching need me to comment on that.
But let's get a little more information. Number two, our sun is supposedly about 4.5 to 5 billion years old, according to astronomical calculations, and data have been interpreted to account for that. But remember, the data can be misinterpreted as well.
Obviously, we all know that already. I mean, the whole point of your show is to demonstrate it.
Watch the following. A team of Russian astronomers writing in the respected British scientific journal Nature and Science are the world's most prestigious scientific journals.
Which you seem to respect when they publish something you can twist to your own purposes, but not the other 99.99999% of the time when everything they publish contradicts you so thoroughly that you're not creative enough to make it work.
These astronomers demonstrated how their research pointed clearly to the startling fact that the sun does not seem to possess a large, dense, nuclear-burning core as we had assumed for the past decades. Instead, their results model the sun as bearing characteristics of a very young, homogeneous star.
Nor do you seem to respect them when the nearly 40 years of work published in them since that 1976 paper have shown that its finding of a 160-minute solar cycle was incorrect. That concept was what the creationist you took that from, Keith Davies, based his argument on for the sun having characteristics of a young star. Apparently his reasoning had problems of its own, but I couldn't care less because his premise was totally obsolete long before he came up with the argument in 1996. Why do you people insist on working with ancient data? In 500 years, if you're still around, and you probably will be because reptoids live a long time, it'll be funny to hear you still citing this obsolete 1976 paper and talking about polystrate trees.
Very young by standard astronomical calculations.
Why is everything standard with you? Obviously they weren't standard calculations because this was new work. Unless you mean standard as in not based on a new system of mathematics.
We're talking about real science instead of the supposed propaganda of a naturalistic interpretation.
Supposed propaganda, so other people suppose it to be propaganda, but you disagree? You know, if you didn't constantly stop to declare that you're totally not making all of this up, I wouldn't have to keep picking on you every time you trip yourself up with your pathetic failures at using the language, but... oh well, whatever, it's fun. Hey, by the way, where's your guest? Maybe you should bring an English teacher on. I'm sure one of them would know just as much about science as the math teacher you had last time, and it'd be a good experience for you. They could bitch at you every time you fuck up, and maybe you'd learn a thing or two about speaking like a human.
You see, naturalists... and Darwin was the spokesman for those in his day. Dr. Stephen Jay Gould was the spokesman in his day. Dr. Ernst Mayr is one of the spokesmen today.
Are you trying to conflate naturalism with evolution? And are you trying to say that there's some sort of official spokesman for either of those? And even funnier, are you really trying to say that Stephen Jay Gould, who within the scientific community was one of the more controversial evolutionary biologists of his time, was the spokesman of his day for all naturalists or all evolutionary biologists?
But some of the naturalists are now realizing that the data are coming in showing that the long periods of time are not necessarily there.
Which naturalists? In this video, you didn't even bother to start making the argument that naturalists are starting to think the universe is young. This is actually the first time you've mentioned it, so surely now you're going to present some examples.
That the genuine interpretation of data now correspond to recency, at least more recency.
Okay, so no examples. How about some examples of the genuine interpretations of data that show more recency? So far you haven't presented a genuine interpretation of anything.
And when you understand the expansion of space fabric,
Do you?
place the calculations in that view which has been ignored by most astronomers.
Geez, it must just be a big ol' fucking conspiracy, eh? It couldn't possibly be that it's pants on head retarded or anything.
You find that the entire universe fits the recent creation model as found in the biblical record.
Okay, so let's sum up your argument. When you don't bother to understand even the basics of how things work, and you interpret data in ways that are only possible when you ignore most of it, and you make up a bunch of lies and misrepresentations with no interest in finding the truth but only in finding a path to your pre-selected conclusion, then the entire non-existent universe that you've invented in your little pea brain fits the creation model as found in the biblical record. Okay, I think I got it. Very well presented, sir. You've proved that point beyond a reasonable doubt.
I wonder why that would be so.
Well, it's because if you have no shame and no limits on how dishonest you'll be to yourself and others, you can pretend anything's true.
That would be so because by the word of God were the heavens made, and literally by the breath of his mouth. Now that seems to be a strange, unscientific statement. Not so. Astrophysicists have found, and physicists have corroborated.
Damn! Random insult to the astrophysicists for no reason, saying they're not physicists. What'd they do to deserve that? Question your gravity well hypothesis?
That all the mass and energy of the universe came from acoustical expression.
No. Just no, Carl. That's so wrong that I don't even know where to begin. And I won't because you didn't bother to actually argue for it.
Acoustical expression. The expression of energy in sound waves. No wonder the Bible speaks of the breath of his mouth because
the authors of the Bible made shit up, just like you do.
God materialized himself and we heard him speak 2,000 years ago. When we heard him speak, he spake as never man had spoken before.
Directly out of his ass?
He didn't speak as the scribes and the Pharisees, giving a supposition to their interpretation of history. He spoke as one who knew because he was there. He performed the creation. Then he went to Calvary. He died on the cross. He shed his blood for our sins. He arose from the dead.
I can't decide if it'd be funnier to hear your evidence for the acoustical expression thing or all that Bible stuff. Probably the acoustical expression thing, actually, just because I've heard plenty of attempts at the other stuff before.
And at this moment, he is gently, ever so gently, quietly, ever so quietly, knocking at your heart's door.
Hearts don't have doors, but I guess a non-existent door is appropriate for a non-existent mythical character's non-existent knocking. Okay, look, please, you've been talking so much and saying so little that you're forcing me to make dumb jokes like that, and I just wish you'd bring your guest on so we can really get started on the video, because up till now, it's just been so boring and awful. Please?
Lord Jesus, I ask you to step into my heart. You're my creator. I want you to be my Lord and Savior. I'll serve you with all my heart.
Wait, what the fuck? That was the end? Where was your guest? You couldn't bring on one of all those scientists, you know, by first name? I know I wanted to talk to you alone since episode 1, and I guess, finally you actually gave me the opportunity to do that, but Carl, Mr. Baugh, I beg you, don't appear without a guest, ever again. This was pure agony, and this video sucks balls now, and will be deservedly panned. Thanks, Carl, you just have yourself the worst day now.